given the time of the year, my thoughts always come to the harvest. Having grown up on a farm and then having worked in the agricultural field for my entire life, the harvest that's when everything comes together. When finally you get paid. It's the payoff for what all the work, what all the toils have been. And Charlie had asked me before the service whether or not there was going to be a history lesson. For those of you who are new here, history is kind of my thing, kind of why I have the long hair. We do historical reenactment, etc. But yeah, there's always a history in there. And this one hits a little bit close to home, the United States Department of Agriculture. In part, I'm including this because the PowerPoint presentation I had a lot of nice pictures anyway, but also working for USDA, I also have access to plenty of pictures or relate to agriculture, so I'll give them the props as well. But it was established in 1862. Lincoln called it the People's Department, since over half of the nation at the time was directly or indirectly involved in agriculture or ag business. The department started, notice the statistic, it started with 8 people. 8 employees was the first USDA, which is interesting because we can have that many in one county office pretty easily anymore. And there's lots of county offices. So, and also, an interesting little tidbit, the department saw fit to hire me in 1988. So for 36 years, I've been employed by the United States Department of Agriculture, which statistically speaking is over 20% of the history of the USDA. So there are times like that when I think I'm getting old. Anyway, part of what goes into here is a lot of what Lincoln called it the People's Department, because so many people in the United States were employed in agriculture or agricultural-related business at the time. But also at the time of Christ, obviously agriculture was pretty much going to be the primary occupation of most people. So everyone was very tuned in to what was going on in the field of agriculture, had a good concept of what it was all about. And in this presentation, we'll be working a lot with Matthew 13 and the parables related to agriculture. But for anybody who's not been here before, all the verses will be up here on the screen. Hopefully I've made them big enough so you can read them, but if you want to follow along in your own Bible, feel free. Every harvest begins with sowing the seed. So we look out across the way, we have, a bean field over there the leaves are starting to turn, they're going to start dropping. Cornfield on the way, where everything's already coming off. Plenty of bean fields have started to be harvested as well. Many rolls of hay on my trip to church here today. But every harvest, it begins with sowing the seed. Planting that seed is how we start the whole process. So, beginning in Matthew 13, verses 3 through 8. A sower went out to sow, and as he sowed, some seeds fell along the path, and the birds came and devoured them. Other seeds fell on rocky ground, where they did not have much soil, and immediately they sprang up, since they had no depth of soil. But when the sun rose, they were scorched, and since they had no root, they withered away. Other seeds fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked them. Other seeds fell on good soil and produced grain, some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. A benefit to preaching on these particular parables is that soon thereafter they are explained by Jesus himself. And in Matthew 13, 18 through 23, hear then the parable of the sower. When anyone hears the word of the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes, snatches it away, and what has been sown in his heart, that is what is sown along the path. As for what was sown on the rocky ground, there is the one who hears the word, immediately receives it with joy. Yet he has no root in himself, but endures for a while, and when tribulation or persecution rises on account of the word, immediately he falls away. As for what was sown among the thorns, this is the one who hears the word, but the cares of the world and the deceitfulness of riches choke the word, and it proves unfruitful. As for what is sown on good soil, this is the one who hears the word and understands it. And indeed, he bears fruit and yields. In one case, 100-fold, in another 60, and another 30. There was some parts of what we had discussed in the class today that relate to this. Can those be brought back? What was first talked about? If you sow there, if some seeds fall out on the path, that's very hard ground. It's been beaten down. Will the seed even be able to sprout at all? Or whether it will even take hold at all? What is sown on the rocky ground? It may germinate. If the rains come well enough, maybe it'll even grow some. But will at some point it just wither away because it doesn't have the foundation. It doesn't have the roots down in there to keep itself sustained. And part of what we were talking about in the class today relates to that. Is the seed planted in someone? But then do they just, because they do not have that depth of soil, do they fall away? Do they need more nourishment? Do they need more teaching? Do they need more influence? Can it become productive? What is sown among the thorns? That maybe we can get the seed out there, but then the thorns, the weeds, everything else pops up and takes away from the sunlight, from the nourishment that they may be receiving, takes away the rain that comes in, and instead, what we had planted may be taken away like that. Can we come in? Can we nourish that? Can we move away the thorns, move away the weeds, and keep that productivity? As for what is sown on the good soil, that's someone who hears the word, understands it, begins to get that depth, begins to get those roots, so that when trials, tribulations may come, that then they can continue to produce. So what are we looking at? If you have poor soil, rocky ground, again, relating back to the class this morning, do we just give up on it, or do we look for other ways to make this somehow productive? Everyone knows John 3:16, but that particular teaching continues in 3:17. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but in order that the world might be saved through him. If we have this ground over here that, yes, it's rocky, it's not the best soil, do we just leave it? Or do we consider what that soil may be good for? It's on hills. Maybe we have something going there. Could it be put out to pasture? Can we seed some grass that will be able to withstand the poor conditions? Can it be used for some other use? Is there something we can do to make this productive? And even in Matthew 28:19, therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, part of the Great Commission. The same way, you may have poor soil over here, and they may not be the best conditions that we may be looking for, but we may not just abandon that. We may find a purpose. We may find some way to get that depth, get that root, to get that into a productive condition. Some Old Testament references that are applicable to this particular reference. Proverbs 20:4. Anyone who refuses to work doesn't plow in the right season. When they look for a crop at harvest time, they don't find it. Another translation of this said, the lazy farmer who doesn't plow in the right season. And unfortunately, through my career, I've seen plenty of people that probably fit that description. For better or for worse, they may not currently be in business just because they were too concerned with other things rather than getting the crop out on time, getting all the chores done on time, getting everything done. What happens if someone does just put a seed out there and then hope at the end of the year something's popped up? If you buy some calves, you don't just say, they'll be fine. I'll check on them here in a while and they'll be good to go. It doesn't work that way. There needs to be attention brought to all this. There needs to be conditions done that make for that production that we're looking for. Unfortunately, some of the farmers that I've worked with over the years, they become far too concerned with other things, whether it be, maybe they're having marital conditions, maybe they're, sometimes they have other jobs that they're very involved with that they can't get around to the time. And in some of the most unfortunate cases, we've had some who were just far too concerned with where their next drink came from. And it doesn't always end up well. We need to be able to have that work. We need to be able to put in that work. And they need to be able to put in that work so that they can become productive. Ecclesiastes 11:4, farmers who wait for perfect weather never plant. If they watch every cloud, they never harvest. The technology for planting a crop, harvesting a crop has gotten much, much better since the time we were running our planters and combines over the field across the street. Now, if you have a week of good weather, a lot of the farmers can get most of their crop planted, even if they're large operations. But there's always those years. 2019, I can attest to, was a year where basically every 2 or 3 days we were getting substantial rain. And no matter what, the farmers just couldn't get into the fields because the conditions were just too wet. About the time it would get about dry enough where you could start considering running those very heavy implements over the field, it would rain again, and if you tried to go out there, you would be stuck up to your axles. So I remember a lot of people planting a lot of crop in June of that year, which is at the very least a month, if not 2 months, later than what it would be. But at the same time, if you're looking at the weather report and thinking, well, doesn't look like it's going to rain for a few days, so I'll put it off. Maybe I'll wait till then so that it'll get some rain right after I plant. You never know when the right time is going to be. If the conditions are there, you need to act. You got to make hay while the sun shines, right? And in the same way, if they watch every cloud, they never harvest. Well, it's looking like something coming in there to the west. I don't want to get my combine out in the middle of the field and have it pour down on me. There may be troubles coming, but we need to know when it is time to harvest, when it is time to get that grain in the bin. Ecclesiastes 11:6. Plant your seed in the morning and keep busy all afternoon, for you don't know if profit will come from one activity or another, or maybe both. I like this verse just because, Yeah, plant your seed. Oh, hey, I got planting done. I can sit back and watch TV, drink some coffee, have a good day of it. What if the equipment needs uh, maintained? What if, if you have livestock, maybe they need to be replaced. Maybe you need to work on the barn. Maybe who knows what it is that may need still to be done. We don't always know what our actions will be. Yeah, maybe we're out there talking to somebody, studying with them, uh, planting that seed so that they can hopefully flourish. But if the rest of the time all we're doing is sitting around drinking coffee, uh, are we doing anything that might come to fruition? Being a good influence somewhere along the way, uh, just being a good person. Uh, who knows what it can be? Keep busy all afternoon because you don't know when, where, why we may do or say something that may benefit the harvest. Further on in Matthew 13, come to the parable about the weeds. And this is Matthew 13, verses 24 through 30. The kingdom of heaven may be compared to a man who sowed good seed in his field. While his men were sleeping, his enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and went away. So when the plants came up and bore grain, then the weeds appeared also. And the servants of the master of the house came and said to him, Master, did you not sow good seed in your field? How then does it have weeds? He said to them, An enemy has done this. So the servant said to him, Then do you want us to go and gather them? But he said, No, lest in gathering the weeds you root up the weed along with them. Let both grow together until the harvest, and at the harvest time I will tell the reapers, Gather the weeds first and bind them in bundles to be burned, but gather the wheat into my barn. So again, one of the better parts of this study. Shortly thereafter, the parable is explained. Again in Matthew 13, starting in verse 37 and continuing through 43, Jesus answered, The one who sows the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world, and the good seed is the sons of the kingdom. The weeds are the sons of the evil one, and the enemy who sowed them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the age, and the reapers are the angels. Just as the weeds are gathered and burned with fire, so will it be at the end of the age. The Son of Man will send his angels, and they will gather out of his kingdom all causes of sin and all lawbreakers, and throw them into the fiery furnace. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Then the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. He who has ears, let him hear. So a few things to unpack out of this. The one who sows the good seed is the Son of Man. So Jesus brought us the good word, and we are the ones that are to be sowing that seed, putting that out into the world. But the world, that's the field, but also that's where the evil ones come in, the temptations, the weeds. The enemy, the devil, will continually be putting weeds into that field. I can look out and see a few weeds hanging out in the middle of that bean field. Back in the day, they didn't have all the herbicides, all the technology we now have. So in order to get rid of weeds, basically you'd have to go out physically into the field, pull them up. But if you're going out and pulling up all the weeds, are you also pulling up your wheat, pulling up your crop as well? Are you doing as much damage as you may be causing better production? So the harvest is at the end of the age, and the reapers are the angels. So we will have weeds out amongst those. We will plant that seed, and there may be those naysayers that pop up. But if we continue with our course, at the end of the age, the angels will come and they will gather the wheat. But also at the end of the age, pull up all the weeds, throw them into the fire, and burn them. For one, very good practice from a production standpoint, not just taking the weeds and chucking them off to the side, because then they will again come back again. Putting them into the fire, burn the seeds, and they won't come back. At that time, that was one of the better production practices there is. But obviously, we're looking at the metaphor of throwing them into the fiery furnaces, which of course will relate to sending them to the devil and to hell. But then the righteous, once those weeds are pulled and thrown into the fire, then we can harvest the wheat, the righteous, and they will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. A further condition that does come into play, drought. Currently, most of Ohio is considered to be in a drought condition. And in some spots of southern and especially southeastern Ohio, it has gotten to the point of extreme. We have some offices down there right now that are far busier than they have possibly ever been, just because of the depth of the drought. Amos 4:7. I also withheld rain from you when the harvest was still 3 months away. I sent rain on one town, but withheld it from another. One field had rain, another had none, and dried up. We just have those conditions come in. James 5:7. Be patient then, brothers and sisters, until the Lord's coming. See how the farmer waits for the land to yield its valuable crop, patiently waiting for the autumn and the spring rains. There are times when we have to be patient. Sometimes there are dry conditions that come along and test our crop, test our faith. This past Mother's Day, Kathy and her mom got a wealth of presents, a number of which were some nice planters, one nice little hibiscus. Not long after Mother's Day, we had one of our rendezvous, so we were gone for a week and a half, during which there was no rain. We got back, and all of these planters and plants were in sad condition. But once we got back, we put some water on them, watered them again, see what would happen, and they came back. The hibiscus looked horrible. All the leaves had dropped off, but within a few days, it had started to bloom again. And within a week or two, it was producing the bright red flowers that come along with us. So even though we may have those dry times, may have those trials and tribulations, if we come back and care for that seed, care for that plant, we can, once again, bring it back to life. And again, back to our talk during the class today. You never know, somebody that's fallen away, somebody that's come on hard times. Just being available, being there, you may bring them back to life. But soon we do get to the harvest. And as I said, we're at that point now. Galatians 6 in verse 7, do not be deceived. God cannot be mocked. A man reaps what he sows. Back to some of our previous references. If you waited until June to sow, you may not have a lot out there. If it was due to the rain, maybe there was nothing you could do about it. But if it's because you're the lazy farmer, then you reap what you sow. Verse 9 says, "Let us not grow weary in doing good, for in due season we will reap if we do not give up." Again, patience. We never know when what we sow will actually produce. Matthew 9, verses 36 through 38. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, "The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into his harvest field." That's us. We are the few. The workers are few. The world is large. And the harvest is plentiful. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into his field. We need the prayers, the supplication. But again, we also need to be the ones that are available in order to do the Lord's work. And the final slide of the day, John 4, and starting in verse 34, Jesus said, "My food is to do what my Father sent me to do. My food is to finish his work. Don't you have the saying? You say, 'It's still 4 months until harvest time.' But I tell you, open your eyes, look at the fields. They are ripe for harvest now. Even one who gathers the crop is getting paid. They are already harvesting the crop for eternal life. So the one who plants and the one who gathers can now be glad together. Here's a true saying: one plants and another gathers. I sent you to gather what you have not worked for. Others have done the hard work. You have gathered the benefits of their work." So a few things in this. You never know what your role may be. Are you the one who will be sowing the seed? Will you be the one tending the seed? Will you be the one gathering the seed? Do we know what time is ripe for harvest? Look out on the bean field, we can see the leaves are dropping and are turning. They'll be dropping here in a bit. And you'll be able to look and say, "Yep, that's ripe for harvest now." Do we always know that when we're out there with these people, with those who may need our help? Here's the true saying: one plants and another gathers. Again, sometimes we may be finishing the work of someone else. Maybe someone planted that seed. Maybe we need to just tend it for a while. And ultimately, maybe someone else will gather it. But we need to be a part of whatever we need to be a part of. We need to do the work. We need to work in the afternoon after the seed's been planted, in the morning. We need to know what we need to do, when we need to do it. And I sent you to gather what you have not worked for. Again, we may be the ones, someone else has planted the seed, someone else has tended it. But by our influence, by our work with these people, maybe we do end up being the ones that gather. We never know what time or day. But we need to be there. We need to be available. We need to be able to teach so that they can hear. We need to be there if they want to repent, if they want to believe, and if they want to become part of us through the baptism. If there's anyone here today that is in any stage, we need to sow the seed. You can come and talk to us. We can help plant that seed. If you need some supplication, need something, need to have more understanding, more depth, grow those roots, we are welcome to do that. Let us know. And if it is time for you to believe, confess, repent, and be baptized, we're here for that as well. We can plant, we can tend, we can also reap and benefit our God and His glory. If there's anyone who has anything, we ask you to come as we stand.